now. So why don't we start with, tell us your name and what you do, and then we'll get into how you came to do it.
Well, my name is Donna Lozito, and I am an animal communicator by trade, professional communicator, and I'm also a classical homeopath. And the reason I mention both in this conversation is because one actually led to the other. This is not something when I was a little girl, I thought, oh, gee, I want to be an animal communicator and I want to be a homeopath. It's not, it just kind of happened on life's path for me. I have always had a passion for animals. You know, I had a very difficult childhood, so the animals were I don't know, I've been talking to animals from as far back as I could remember, just feeling what they were feeling and understanding how they felt when they were in certain situations. And then my parents and my relatives would tell me, that's not true, that's not possible. And I say to myself, yeah, well, it is actually possible. I had this special love for horses. Since I came out, I was born with this passion for horses. And so when I was a kid, my dad used to take me riding once in a while, and it was just, nothing ever really came of it. Never really got me a horse. That was my one life's dream is, I didn't want to get married. I didn't wanted to have a horse. And so when I got to be, a middle-aged adult, I thought to myself, why don't I just get myself a horse? Because this is what I've always dreamt of. And I did. And I was living in New York at the time, not a ton of money, so I didn't have thousands and thousands to spend. So I went riding, and I met this thoroughbred that was very talented. He was a hunter jumper. He jumped 5 feet. And so there's my dream. I want to, it's going to be a show jumper. I was going to go to the Hampton Classic, and I was going to be this equestrian. And so when I purchased him, almost immediately after I purchased him, he was injured. So I did some riding, a couple of lessons, and he was injured. And they told me at this barn, do not, get rid of this horse because he can't jump anymore. And at that moment, I was so stunned that someone would say that to me. And I was like, this is my animal. This is, he's injured and he's hurt. And so I started taking him to veterinarians, and no one could really figure out why his leg was not healing. And one day I picked up a magazine, and in this magazine, it said, animals can communicate with us. And I thought, oh my goodness, let me take a look at this. How do you do it? How does it go? How does it work? And so I read what, the article said, and I tried it. And the reason I tried it is because the veterinarians weren't getting anywhere with him. They were not understanding why the leg, yes, he would get better, and then he wouldn't get better. And so when I followed the instructions in this magazine, and I asked him why his leg wasn't getting better, I get this profound answer that he said to me, it isn't my leg that's the problem. It's my immune system. If you boost my immune system, my leg will heal. And so I thought I was losing my mind. And then I called a woman who wrote the article. And I said, I asked my horse, like you said in the magazine. And she said, oh, yeah. And so I said, would you ask? And so then I went to, communicators nationwide to try to see if I was get the right information. And sure enough, got the right information. Okay, so now his immune system is the issue. So I searched up and down the East Coast to find a veterinarian who would listen to what my horse had to say, that my horse said, this is his immune system. And I found a veterinarian in Pennsylvania, a holistic veterinarian. She said, of course it's his immune system. Bring him down and we'll take care of it. So we did. I brought him down. I put him on a truck. We went down and we did what he said. And lo and behold, his leg got better. He was jumping fences again. And so
how did you hear his message or know it?
it was a what I like to describe today as a receiving an impression, receiving its energy. Actually, you know, in hindsight today, I see what was happening is that I received an impression because our words are really energetic. So, you know, it's kind of like when you know what someone's thinking, you kind of know that, and then you interpret that to yourself. That's what it is. It's very similar to that. So I receive these impressions of information, and then it gets translated into words. It's like a knowing and then of course he was very succinct in his message, because the animals, when they want us to have get a message, they make sure we get it. And you know, in hindsight, after all the years working with Sweetie, he said, you know, there were certain things that you had to get. And this communication was part of, I mean, it was life-changing. It was life-changing for me.
So he healed. Then
So
what?
he healed, and I had him down in Pennsylvania, and I thought, you know, let me just leave him here, because they really understood him down there, and in New York, not so much. And so I left him there, and I came back, you know, to the back and forth on the weekends, and I started to really get, you know, involved in this communication field, to really understand it, and to really, because, you know, the truth about it is that it really is building the intuitive muscle. And so really we have to practice. And so you know, I took a course or two, and then I just started to go out and do it. So I would be working in the city in the daytime, and I'd be talking to animals in the nighttime. And then, you know, after, you know, a little bit of time, not a lot of time, he was then diagnosed with a brain tumor. And the veterinarian who helped him the first time said, you know, we have to give him medicine. So I go back to Sweetie, and he was like, no medicine, no medicine. He said, because if you give me the medicine, we're going to have two problems. We're going to have the problem that we already have, and we're going to have a reaction to the medicine. So go find another way, not conventional medicine. So at that time in my life, I was shaking in my boots. You know, here I have this horse that's got this dangerous illness, and so I found homeopathic medicine.
What is homeopathic medicine?
Homeopathic medicine is an energetic. It's termed energetic, and by that I mean that it is just the energy essence of the substance from nature. So there's no substance in homeopathy. There's just the energetic essence. So when we found this, when I found this, I found a homeopathic vet, and we gave him sulfur was the remedy that came up. It was the energetic expression of this substance from nature. And I knew nothing about it. I was like, you know, I was ready, you know, he told me to not give conventional medicine, so let's try this. And so we gave this energetic substance twice a day. And after a month, his coat started to shed. He then came to his feet. His breathing became better. And I watched over, you know, and natural medicine takes a little longer than conventional medicine, because it follows the beat of the body, and that's way slower than the beat of our mind. So it is slower, but I really got to see the aspect of healing, that this remedy that was having this conversation with his vital force just transformed this horse over time. It was the most profound experience. So then he gets better from this homeopathic medicine, and I have to then become a homeopath. It was like, I have to study this, I have to look more into this, just like I did with the communication. So now today, what I do is I combine both, because they're both energetic practices. And it's kind of what I do. It's become my life's passion.
How do you work with clients, especially for human clients who aren't familiar with this form of communication and this way of healing, how do you introduce it and how do you work with them?
Well, for the most part, the animals lead the way. So the animal will maybe present an issue. And, a person who is completely unaware of this type of work will go the behavioral, they'll go to the trainer, and then they'll go to the veterinarian, and then they'll go by observation what they see from the animal. And then oftentimes, it's not all the time, but oftentimes if all else fails, then they will, look up an animal communicator, and because, oh, my vet can't figure out what's going on. Can you talk to my animal's having this behavioral issue. Do you think you can? And so that is the way in. And then what I find is educating the person out of the gate is really important to explain what I'm doing and the process of it, because it's really telepathy. And so when I start to explain that it's, that before our words are words, their energy, the animals, respond to energy, they move towards the energy, away from the energy, they get an understanding with their mind of what's happening. Then I communicate with the animal, and I try to make it so that it's a conversation and not a psychic reading, so to speak. And they'll ask a question, and then the animal will give the answer, and then I interpret the message. And if it's something that, and especially if it's something that I shouldn't have known or they didn't tell me, and it's something that they resonate with, that's the first. I see that as the beginning of an opening that is something very new and unfamiliar to them. But because it's accurate, and listen, it's conversation. So when I say accurate, is animal community, we always look for proving and for it to be proved and for it to be 100% right. And if it's a conversation, when you have a conversation with a person, sometimes you misunderstand, you ask again. And so that when that happens after a consult, I see that there is a recognition of sorts of the practice. And then I kind of explain to them how to do it, because it's not exclusive to me. It is, we're animals, they're animals. We're all beings that can communicate, and I teach them how to do it. And then I tell them to continue to talk with your animal. And then they watch the changes happen as they do this.
So it's the evidence.
It is kind of, in a way, it's not, scientific evidence, but it is evidence. And sometimes it's not that clear. Sometimes it's just a feeling they have. It's like, wow, this person really understands, because people know who their animals are. They may say they don't, or they may say they can't understand them, but they actually do. And when I resonate with that understanding, I see that it's really very helpful for them to proceed forward and in communicating on their own. I have a lot of repeated clients, but some people are one-timers.
And with the conversations, the intuitive conversations and the homeopathy, I assume you don't promise particular results, or, I mean, what happens if the animal improves and then eventually the disease comes back? How do you deal with expectations is my question.
Well, I think explaining, first of all, when it's a chronic disease, if it's a chronic disease, I will always refer it to a veterinarian, whether it be a homeopathic veterinarian or a conventional. I always suggest to have both, because having both eyes on an illness is from my perspective important. And they generally follow through with that. If I'm actually working with the homeopathy, I explain to them what it is and what we're looking for. And for the most part, it does make a change. We're not, the expectation of the person, nothing is perfect. So, if it's something that I see that's going to change a behavior and it needs all of the components, remedy, communication, I mean, healing is not just one thing. And that's when we incorporate, understanding the perspective. Maybe some homeopathy. I find that understanding the perspective of an animal is is a game changer. So when I explain that to people, and if it's a behavioral issue, and we understand the perspective of the animal and where that behavior is sourced, and the person has to really kind of get it, the animal shifts by 50 and maybe more, by 50% and more. If a remedy is needed, we add a remedy to it.
Well, I can personally attest to what you're saying of the power of that kind of evidence and experiencing both the intuitive conversation and homeopathy with my animals. How did this journey into this realm change your life or your own journey?
That's such a great question because, certainly after years of practice, I have seen and I'm now able to answer that, in that the animals live and breathe on this planet for very specific purposes, each individually. And I see that opening up to that heart space that they live and breathe in really forced me, with practice, with observation, to learn what love actually is, and then to proceed from that space to explore my spiritual course of resolving old traumas, shadow work. And it was just, for me, Ellen, it was kind of like an opening, a door open for me based on the love for this animal. And I just walked right through. And I had, my horse is passed now, and we still communicate. This is a spirit who came to me in this particular lifetime, that is he's my guide. He changed the course of my life, because I don't think that I could have received that kind of information from a human. And it was because of all the trauma. So the animals, they serve different purposes on our journeys for different reasons and for different people. But from my perspective, and in my case on this journey, he just opened the door of my heart, which was quite shut. And then from there, I proceeded forward. I mean, the homeopathic medicine unto itself is a practice that I found really enriched the communication. Because with the remedies, you're conversing with all of nature, with the plants, with the rocks, with it's the energetic information that is available, and that has to resonate with the being who's taking the remedy. So that's even a more in-depth process of understanding, and really understanding that our true purpose is to really understand nature.
Well,
Our nature and nature.
it's about connection, I would say. Is that a way of thinking of it?
Right. It is most for sure, it's about connection, because when we connect with another plant, person, animal, it brings us to life. That's what our purpose is to connect with others.
You've met veterinarians, and I have two actually, who are sympathetic to these alternative ways of addressing issues with our animals, but there is resistance within the community. I'm wondering how you perceive that, and how do you approach vets who are still somewhat resistant to accepting wholeheartedly the approach of intuitive communication and homeopathy?
Well, it's been challenging, I will say. it follows in the steps of the process of seeing is believing. And, because in the beginning, in my early days, I was out to prove that, that this is this, because I knew this was right. But, there is that community, that the scientific community that, makes this woo-woo. They call this woo-woo, and this can't be. And I think that over time, our society, our culture is shifting. And they're becoming more open to the possibility that there is energy, and while they may not buy into it, I see more and more that they're much more open to it than they were 25, 30 years ago.
I agree from what I've learned
Yeah.
with people. So that's definitely a paradigm shift. It's perhaps a part of the paradigm shift in how we perceive animals and how we relate to them. Could you talk about that a little?
I think that's a really important factor in this at this particular juncture, because I think our culture has been conditioned. We have been conditioned to somehow believe that animals, I know when I was growing up, they didn't have souls. They certainly didn't have intelligence. They didn't have, they couldn't think. They did. And as a kid, I used to think that's not right, but I was a kid, and so I didn't fight it. And and then as I grew, I started to see that somehow there's that humans are on a higher level than any species on the planet. And I think that we're seeing very slowly that is shifting, because from my perspective, we share this planet with plants, with rocks, with animals, and certainly in my practice, what I've seen, that it isn't the size of the brain that demonstrates the intelligence. It's the evolution, the place in evolution that the soul is. So if it's an older soul, there's a lot of wisdom. There's been a lot of wisdom revealed to me from animals that people are not even near. So, and we're measuring our intelligence to, it's because they can't do mathematics. That means they're not intelligent. And so it's a different kind of intelligence. And I think that, and actually it's divine intelligence, really. It's divine intelligence, which is from my perspective, the highest form of intelligence that exists. And, that's kind of why I do the work, each day, one person at a time, one animal at a time. I see things be really changing.
Do you have an example of a wisdom that you received from an animal other than what you received through Sweetie?
Well, I can get into spirit with animals. It's just their perspective on, let me think if I could think of a specific, it's kind of like when a person asks a question of their animal, and then they respond to the level, the place that this person is on their journey. So here's an example. A woman had called me, and her dog just passed. And she was just brokenhearted and devastated. And so, and not to get into the whole subject of animals and spirit, the information that came from the animal in the way that she was able to hear it was that the animal described the exact place that she is on her journey, and that it was the right time for this animal to leave, and that this and this and this is how she should proceed, and this is why she's ready. And so when you reveal that information of the soul journey, they have to recognize where they are You know, in this particular instance, he was describing how her choice of men was poor, and that she needed to step it up, and that he was going to help her from where he's at. So you know, of course, then you get into that whole woo-woo thing again, but I see it every day. I see people change. I see people connect with their animals, whether they're in their body or they're in spirit, and I see life changing. It's life changing.
Sort of a joint journey. I mean, I've asked this question before, because it's possible that you're connecting with the human's spirit, with the human also, and the animal, because they
You
would
mean
be.
the human that I'm talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. It is what it isn't. Let me say what it isn't first before I say what it is. It isn't my perception of what is. I think it's really important with this work to understand what your own personal perceptions are, so that they're not projected into the consultation. Because I am just the vehicle by which the message flows through. So I have to know that what my perceptions and beliefs are. And then I have to step back and then let the information flow through. And that is basically done by having no expectation, just transferring the information that's received, and really not being that concerned about how this person feels about it. If I'm just a messenger, a messenger comes to your house, he delivers a package, he leaves. That's kind of what I do. And, I'm a human being, so sometimes I do it better than others, but I'm very cognizant of my perception. Because of this work, I'm intuitive. I'm an intuitive. So I certainly can see where the person may be. But I have no idea what her taste in men is. You know what I mean? Where would that come from? And so it's a very intimate journey with these clients.
Fascinating. Is there anything you'd like to add or talk about to expand on this experience?
I think the one thing that, this is always a message that if nothing else, to sit with your animal quietly and ask a question, ask it from your heart, see what comes back. And that would be the one thing that I think, if anyone is doubtful, to try it and see.
Well, it's a wonderful story and fascinating.
Thank you for the interview. I really, my pleasure to talk with you.
Mine too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take good care.